Well, several things happened last week that I wanted to report to you. The first of which is that Alex's longtime friend, college roommate, and Paul's godfather, Corey Fleming, has pleaded guilty to federal charges, which most of you have probably already heard. Along with his guilty plea, he must relinquish the law licenses that he currently holds in both South Carolina and Georgia. He will also have to submit to a polygraph test. No word on what all he'll be polygraphed for. The charges carry up to 5 years in federal prison and up to $250,000 in fines. He's currently out on a $25,000 bond. But he said something funny in his pleading. He admitted that he knew that Alex planned to take some of the settlement money from the Gloria Satterfield case. But get this, he thought it would only be $100,000. You know, just $100,000, not the whole thing. Can you believe it? So stealing a little, or their version of a little, was going to be perfectly okay with him. I guess that's somewhat of a moral compass, a little more than what Alex had at least. But my big question was whether these federal charges would overtake the state charges, because there are state indictments out as well. But according to news reports, he will still face the state charges as scheduled in September. That, of course, being the Gloria Satterfield case. So now he's going to be tried on a federal level as well as a state level. Now, in my last video, I mentioned the idea of Alex possibly pleading guilty as well to his federal charges. And that's based on the statement his law team made late last week about settling it without a trial. And that led to some other questions that people have asked about federal prison versus state prison, such as, will Alex be transferred to federal prison if he pleads guilty or is found guilty? And that really all depends on how this situation develops. The basic answer is no. He would not, because his state sentence for murder comes first. He would have to finish out his sentence in state prison first before transferring to federal for anything he's sentenced to there. But since he has 2 life sentences, that really wouldn't be a possibility. If somehow he does win his appeal and those murder sentences are then lifted, naturally he would then transfer to his federal sentences if he is found guilty there and sentenced for those. Another possibility would be if there's some deal to be made for a bigger fish than him. So at this moment, I personally don't see what that could be. There didn't seem to be higher up people in cahoots with him that the federal government would need his testimony for so badly that they would be willing to cut such a deal for him. In fact, the only person I can think of for now that would even be a possibility would be Judge Carmen Mullen for allowing Alex to hide his filings and for signing off on paperwork that had very suspicious financial reporting. But I don't see these things being worth a big deal for Alex or Corey, or that she was deeply involved in any kind of regular criminal behavior. She hasn't even been indicted to this point. So no, I don't see, unless there's something huge that's still not been made known, I don't see anything that would be worth a trade-off for Alex for information. Now, again, going on complete speculation, one possibility that could be considered is that something could be used for a deal if there was maybe a type of criminal network that Alex and Corey had been involved in that also involved higher level people, or some gambling ring, trafficking ring, drug dealing thing, something like that that would be worth trading their testimony for. Without something like that, I really personally don't foresee something that would be worth them giving a deal to someone like Alex Murdaugh. But again, this is all my opinion, this is all speculation, so not to be taken as I'm saying this is what's going to happen. That leads me to another question. Why would Alex want federal prison instead of state? And this is a good question because federal always sounds more serious, more daunting. But actually, federal prison is a less dangerous environment. Why? Because things like murder, rape, assault, that sort of thing, they're prosecuted at the state level. Whatever state these crimes are committed in, that would be the state prison where they serve their time in. These are more hardened, dangerous criminals. State prisons are also state-funded, so the conditions really have a lot to do with the state that they're in. Federal prisons are for federal crimes, things that cross multiple state lines, such as larger drug enterprises, bank robbers, and lots of white-collar crimes, for example. These prisons are federally funded, and they're generally better maintained, so all around, shall we say, a better prison experience. But unfortunately for Alex, he decided to murder his family, so he gets to go in with the murderers, rapists, and dangerous criminals where he belongs. In other news, Alex was scheduled to be deposed in prison for the upcoming Mallory Beach trial. I'm not sure if this was done in person or via something like Zoom, but hopefully it was recorded somehow, and that recording will be released at some point, like the Chad Westendorf deposition was. Here's to hoping. If it is, I will definitely share that information with you. The document that was filed regarding this deposition was originally drawn up in 2019, but it doesn't seem to have anything updated on it since then. It was filed May 22nd, but what was interesting to me, I was really shocked to see that John Marvin Murdaugh, Alex's brother, is still the personal representative for Maggie's estate, and I really would have thought that someone from her family would have taken that over, especially after the murder conviction. And John Marvin isn't even an attorney, so it's not for some legal expertise reason. Then for Paul, Alex's brother Randy is still his personal representative, which I would have thought that would be the one that was John Marvin, since Paul worked for him and they were probably closer. But at least Randy is an attorney. Now this is way off topic, but speaking of the boat crash and Maggie and Paul, something that has always bothered me, and I haven't brought it up on here yet, did it ever bother any of you that Maggie was nowhere to be seen at the hospital the night of the boat crash? I mean, for all of you moms out there, if you heard your young son was injured in a boat crash and that his girlfriend and friends that you saw regularly had in your home were also injured and one of them was missing, wouldn't you be the first one there? I mean, whether Alex and his dad wanted her there or not, maybe they said, we have to handle this. Why wasn't she there? This is just something that's always bothered me. But anyway, back on topic. The Mallory Beach trial is approaching and depositions are being taken. And in this document that I just mentioned, it really takes up just one page and then just a little sliver on the top of a second page, followed by 4 full pages of lawyers. So this is going to be a big trial. And speaking of this trial, a little background on the judge that will preside over this case. His name is Daniel Hall, and his background is very similar to the Murdaugh's background. He was an assistant solicitor from 1988 to 1990. He came back to being a personal injury attorney from 91 to 99, and then back to being the assistant solicitor from 1999 to 2011. Then he was an assistant public defender from 2011 to 2014. Then he became judge from 2015, and he was reappointed last year. Those terms last for 6 years. He has one published work, A Time to Speak and A Time to Be Silent, that he co-authored with Lynn Buzzard in 1988 with the Christian Management Association. Now I'll read a little bit about him from an application where he describes himself. Having grown up in a rural environment, learning farm work and land surveying from my father, I continued to do farm work, textile mill work, and land surveying through high school and college. Prior to attending law school, I managed a cattle operation, worked in a meat processing business, and operated a local credit reporting and collection business. In these years, I married my wife of now 38 years, and we had 3 small children. Having read and seen the need for attorneys with integrity to fill the ranks of our justice system, I then made the decision to attend law school. I began law school as a 30-year-old father to 3 small children, and my wife and I had our 4th child during the law school years. I took and passed the South Carolina and North Carolina bar exams in July 1988. I have deeply enjoyed my work as a public servant, as a private attorney, municipal judge, as an assistant solicitor in the 16th Judicial Circuit Solicitor's Office, and as assistant public defender in the 16th Judicial Circuit Public Defender's Office. I believe I am prepared and have the ability to serve as a circuit court judge with both common sense and experienced knowledge of the law. My commitment to justice and serving the common man has well suited me to be a circuit court judge. I would be honored to serve again. He has been known to make some lenient decisions as a judge, which makes me think Paul just might have gotten off easy in a boat crash trial if Alex hadn't killed him. His leniency, in fact, has actually made news. Let's have a look.
New tonight, a sheriff in our area is calling out a judge saying he repeatedly hands down light sentences.
A woman who buried her newborn baby in the backyard. A man who shot a puppy 18 times with a BB gun. All convicted, all eventually given probation. NBC Charlotte defender Michelle Bowden uncovered a pattern that has many in our area disturbed and calling for change.
Brody and Kaylee are the best of buds.
He makes me happy.
But the vet will tell you
1, 2, 3.
Brody
4, 5,
shouldn't
6,
even be
7,
here.
8, 9, 10, 11. And he had about 18 BBs in him and been shot multiple times.
He was a puppy, just 4 pounds and barely 6 weeks old.
Pretty much sick to my stomach. The fact that somebody was capable of doing that to a defenseless animal.
DeMonte Douglas shot Brody with a BB gun 18 times, pled guilty to torturing the lab mix. Douglas is 18, has no priors, and Judge Dan Hall gave him probation. The teen could have gotten as much as 5 years.
It's sad to see that it's turned out to be more or less a slap on the wrist.
The same judge handed out what could be called a slap on the wrist to Tara Ostrowski, a Rock Hill woman who'd already been in court once before, pleading guilty to assault. This time, she pled guilty to unlawful neglect of a child. She was on drugs while pregnant and buried her newborn son in her backyard. Court documents show the baby lived for just 6 to 8 minutes before he died. She could have gotten 10 years in prison. Instead, Judge Hall gave her 5 years probation, but kept her in jail until she got into a drug treatment program. She violated that probation less than a year later when probation supervisors found guns and knives in her home. She went back before Judge Hall. He let her original sentence of probation stand as is.
And they get a slap on the hand.
Union County Sheriff David Taylor has voiced his concerns about Judge Dan Hall before.
The inmates in my jail know when he's coming, and they line up to plead guilty in front of him because they know he's going to give light sentences.
The sheriff says Judge Hall is even light on repeat offenders.
I was irate.
Brandy Northern has been arrested more than 18 times, and the sheriff says almost every time she gets just probation.
It's time that these people be held accountable.
Sheriff Taylor says he was most stunned by the sentence Kenneth Lipsey got. Watch these 2 Union County inmates as they plan, then do escape from jail, climbing up onto the roof and then jump to freedom. One is a convicted murderer. The other, Kenneth Lipsey, in jail convicted of breaking into cars. For helping a murderer escape and escaping himself, he could have gotten up to 10 years. Judge Hall, though, gave him just 3.
Again, I was shocked for the little sentence that this man got.
The sheriff thinks he may have an explanation for Hall's sentencing pattern.
I feel like he's being sympathetic.
USC law professor Ken Gaines agrees.
That's why you have judges. Some are hard, some are a little softer.
Before becoming a judge, Hall was a public defender who 4 years ago got punched in court when his client wasn't happy with the 10-year sentence he got for robbery.
I'm Michelle with NBC. Just wanted to talk to you about the fact that some people have said that you're too lenient in hitting down your sentences.
I have no comment, thank you.
Professor Gaines says Judge Hall isn't doing anything wrong because statutes spell out possible sentences.
Just because somebody disagrees with his sentencing doesn't mean he's doing something illegal.
South Carolina is one of only 2 states where legislators elect judges, not the voters. The Commission on Judicial Conduct will investigate complaints against judges, but a spokeswoman told me those complaints only go somewhere if a judge is actually doing something illegal. A pattern of leniency is well within the law, as long as the sentences handed down follow the law.
So, a lot of this is, taking risks. I don't see anything wrong with that. You may not agree with it, but, the judge has to take all the factors that are allowed to be taken into account and make a decision as to whether this person's a good risk or not.
And the sheriff in Union County has said that some of his inmates actually choose to plead before you because you're so lenient?
I have no comment, thank you.
Nothing at all?
No, thank you.
What needs to happen?
There needs to be a checks and balances system on these judges.
Judges serve a 6-year term and are then up for re-election by the General Assembly. The sheriff says that's not enough checks and balances, and the people that cared for the puppy that was shot 18 times agree.
And I'm quite disturbed that a person got away with something like this.
11-year-old Kaylee has her own take on it.
What do you think of the person that did this to Brody?
They just need to be prayed for.
In South Carolina, Michelle Bowden, NBC Charlotte.
Now, besides these cases just mentioned, later there were even more troubling cases, such as this following one where a young boy was mowed down while waiting for the bus, but managed to push his sister out of the way, saving her life from a hit and run.
At the spot where a young life ended,
I can't really say what's going to lie ahead.
there is a visible beginning, an appreciation for the person Ladarius Wiley was.
We're just dealing with it on a daily basis.
The fifth grader, his little sister Shavante, right there behind her aunt, and a couple of other kids were standing near the corner of Dye and Ashford waiting for a school bus last Tuesday morning when a car, for some reason, veered toward the kids. According to the children, at that moment, 11 years old, Ladarius acted like a superhero.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
And pushed his little sister out of the way.
In other words, he saved his sister. And he ended up being the one that's where he is now.
It happened catty corner from his house. So much about Ashford Street will never be the same. The memorial that's yards away, the wreath outside. Imagine walking out and how difficult it must be to look across the street.
Very.
Can his family even glance?
No.
Still, there's an innocence about Ashford Street. A park where the kids and Ladarius spent a lot of time, played a lot of basketball. It's old, so family, friends, and neighbors would like to see it be given new life in Ladarius's name. They're trying to get a petition started.
So what they're trying to do is trying to get, rebuild and turn it into a recreation center for the kids. Yeah, so they won't have to be playing all out.
In a quick second that Tuesday morning, Ashford Street changed. But the hope is the story of the little boy who put his sister's life before his own will always live.
And when it came time for the driver to receive sentence, after claiming she thought she hit a deer, which is crazy, where were her eyes as she approached a small group of kids? Why wasn't she looking in her rearview mirror after knowing she hit something? How did she mistake a small boy for a deer? Those are questions a judge should have been asking. Instead, let's see what happened.
In a Lancaster courtroom today, Michelle Johnson was given probation, dodging a prison sentence of as much as 25 years. We told you it was in 2015 that Johnson drove away after hitting Ladarius Wiley in Chester. She told the police that she thought she'd hit a deer. At today's sentencing, Johnson made a tearful apology to the little boy's family.
I am so sorry. I've been wanting to tell you a long time. I cry myself to sleep every night.
Now, the children were outside waiting for the school bus before that accident. The other children at that bus stop called 911, and Ladarius was airlifted to a hospital in Charlotte where he passed away.
Then there's this pervert who set up cameras to film people showering and using the bathroom, including children.
This is new at 5. Authorities have arrested a Mount Pleasant man for several charges, including child pornography and being a peeping Tom. 20-year-old Daniel Pilecki, whom you see here, facing 19 charges connected with sexual exploitation of a minor. Investigators with the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, along with Mount Pleasant Police, arrested Pilecki yesterday. The case will be prosecuted by the Attorney General.
What did he get? Probation. Lastly, a 41-year-old man, Paul Patrick Johnson, was arrested on December 17th for beating his wife with a belt and choking her. He was charged with domestic violence of a high and aggravated nature. Despite prosecutors' arguments that he was a danger to his family, he was granted a $15,000 bond the very next day and told not to have any contact with his wife. But just 2 hours after his release, he was back at his wife's home being recorded on a doorbell video. He was taken back into custody and his bond was revoked. But less than 3 weeks later, Johnson asked the court to reconsider his bond revocation. And on January 8th, once again, despite prosecution's arguments that he was a danger to his family, Johnson was released and told again to avoid contact with his wife. 3 months later, to the day, Johnson fatally shot his wife, his 5-year-old son, and then himself. The judge who set him free? Judge Hall. This is the judge that will be presiding over the boat case. Hopefully, he will leave the leniency behind. So far, he's made some fair rulings, allowing press and cameras in the courtroom, and also not allowing Alex to use his 401k funds to pay for his defense attorneys. Let's hope he stays on a good streak. That brings this update to a close. I have more videos coming later this week, so as always, this is Cassidy O'Connell saying stay well and stay tuned.